Welcome to this Blender tutorial. In this tutorial, I want to talk you through how setting up a small dramatic lighting scene works, or how I approach it. The project files are free. They are on a Patreon link, but it is a free post. No obligation to subscribe, no obligation to pay anything. If you want, you can leave a tip by subscribing on 1 month, but nothing is required. So what we want to be able to do today is look at these 17th, 18th century paintings, still lifes, that has lots of directional lighting from this side over through the image, and then lots of bright areas, lots of contrast, and obviously shadows on all the opposing sides. This is the look and feel that we are going for. The reason we're doing this is more and more on the internet I see a lot of atmospheric renders, but they have no depth. There's something very valuable in creating hard contrast depth in your scene. So the link to the project files is in the description area. Once you have gone there, you will see a start file and a final file. You will see your textures there. If the textures are not there, you can just unpack the blend file and it'll create the textures folder. Let's go ahead and hit the start file. So you will see, once you've loaded that file, there are furnitures in here, two furniture pieces, and then books arranged like this, and then the two book sets just on their own. The back book set and the front book set is the same 3D model, but they use two different damage textures, 0 damage and some damage. These models I created. All of it is free for any use, commercial or freelance or anything else that you want to use them for. You can use them in whatever way. No usage limitations to that. So let's go ahead and start with our scene. So I have set up 3 cameras. I'm just going to hit 0 and go into the view that I want. You will see if I hit Z and go into rendered view, there are no lights in the scene. This is exactly what I want. We're going to be starting from scratch. To create a scene with so much contrast, it's sometimes good to not use an HDRI in the world setting. So we're not going to be able to do this because this creates too much global fill. So I'm going to talk you through setting up 2 spotlights. So over here, I can create a 3D view and then come into the top view. The reason we're creating 2 spotlights is that I can use one spotlight to create a very hard beam and then use a cookie cutter stencil on that beam to create shadows from outside as if the sun is coming through a tree or leaves. And the second spotlight is full, but it is directional fill. It's not like an HDRI that has a global fill. So let's go ahead and set that up. In my, well, let's hit Shift A and then select light and go to spotlight. Now I can come into the front view and start matching sort of that angle that I saw here, which looks like about 30 degrees or something like that. 30 to 45. I just want the global or the common direction to be more or less correct. And then from the top, I want some light on this edge. So I'm going to have to rotate it a little bit inward. You can see the spot has a very wide cone that I am not going to want. This spot is going to be the hard spot, hard directional light. So let's just call it key. Then a couple of things to notice that we're going to be working with is the power, the radius, the blend, and the spot size. The power is obviously the intensity. The radius controls the softness or hardness of the shadows. If the radius is 0, the shadows is hard. If the radius goes bigger, the shadows go softer. The spot size, that's self-explanatory. And the blend is just the fade between the inner and outer cone of the spot. So let's go and hit Z, get this into rendered view. That gives us an idea where we are. Directionality is good. I can see that by the shadows and the light areas. The light areas are light. The areas that I want to be light are light, but the intensity is very low. So let's up the intensity. Double that. Now the intensity is good, but the cone is too wide. Let's bring the cone in. So that is more or less the area that I want to contain in terms of lighting. So now I know this area will be very nice, very high contrast. So I'm quite happy with that. I might want to soften some of these shadows a little bit. And as I said, to do that, I would need to push up the radius a little bit. So maybe even you can see there, see how that softened. Hard radius shadows, softer shadows. I wanted a little bit in between. Maybe something like that. So that is my key light sorted. Now for the key light, I want to simulate leaves coming or the sun coming through a tree outside. There's maybe a window here and the sun is coming from that direction. To do that, I would have to use the nodes for that light. So with that nodes activated, I can come into my shader editor and I will see the emission node. So on that emission node, I'm going to put a alpha of a tree just to tell the light where to shine and where not to shine. So that color, I'm going to hook up to the strength. The black areas is not going to emit any light. So now I can see something happened here, but it's not very clear. So if I just test that radius, if I bring it all the way down, then I can see the map, which is exactly what I want. So I can see the tree is kind of falling there. I might want to move it over here because then it can create a shadow down here onto this and down here there. That would give me more shape in terms of 3D. So I'm just going to make a 3D viewport there, get into my top view, and then bring the light a little bit forward, like that almost, and maybe a little bit up. So now it's casting shadows on multiple surfaces and it's creating a lot of, I think, almost a little bit of a 3D look. So that is more or less what I want. So if I push the radius up now, it'll soften that a little bit, like you see in real life. So it's creating these very hard contrasty patches. Settle for about 15 and then create the second spot. So to create the second spot, I'm just going to shift D, duplicate this one and call it fill, but then I don't want a stencil on that one. So I will just delete it and then I will switch off the key light just to see what I work with the fill. So the fill light needs to have a much wider cone to encompass the rest of the scene. It's also going to rotate it a little bit to have a little bit more center focus on the scene. Now I can up the radius a little bit to create some more softness on the fill. I can also increase the spot size and you can see how extra lighting is coming into the scene. So I like that for the fill. I'm maybe going to move it down a little bit and then just rotate it up a little bit. And then I can turn the key light back on. So with the key light back on, I can maybe see that the fill needs to be pushed back a little bit. I'm going to make the fill 3/4 of the key light. And now I've got good overall lighting in the scene, but I can see the key light is not strong enough. So I'm going to go quite strong on the key light. Just create something very directional. That's maybe a bit much. And then bring the spot size in again. So that gives me something that that's quite nice. It's quite hard in terms of contrast. So what I can do here as an additional step is if I'm in the cycles engine, scroll all the way down and then just up the exposure a little bit. That'll push, it will really push the whites. You can see there. And these old images, they were all about contrast. So I want as much contrast in the scene as possible. You can see how I've pushed the whites. Now the gamma controls the darkness of the scene. The more gamma you have, the lighter the dark areas are. So I actually want to create more darkness and more contrast. So I'm going to push the gamma back a little bit. You can see how it's affected some of those parts in the scene. And maybe push the contrast down a little bit and the gamma up a little bit, like that. That's almost perfect the way that I have it there. And now you have a very high contrast scene. Very directional, very high contrast, but very simple to create. You can see in the compositor, I did add a little bit of lens distortion. All in all, very simple exercise. Thank you for watching.